Everything you thought you knew about Zak Bagans just changed. At exactly 2:47 a.m. on December 18, 2025, a video file appeared on an encrypted server used by Ghost Adventures production staff. No upload logs, no sender information, just a single file labeled "The Truth About Vegas." What it contained sent shockwaves through everyone who saw it. Within hours, 3 crew members quit. The Travel Channel issued an emergency meeting, and Zak Bagans himself went completely silent, deleting his social media accounts and disappearing from public view. This story goes deeper than anyone imagined. Stay with us, because what you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you see the man who made millions hunting ghosts. Subscribe now. You'll want to remember where you heard this first. The file was 47 minutes long, grainy footage filmed inside the haunted museum after hours. But this wasn't a typical Ghost Adventures episode. There were no camera operators, no crew, no Aaron Goodwin nervously cracking jokes in the background. Just Zak, alone in the basement level that has never been shown to the public. He's sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by candles, speaking directly into a handheld camera. His voice is different, stripped of the theatrical bravado that made him famous. He sounds exhausted, almost defeated. The first words he speaks send chills through anyone watching. "I need to tell you what really happened in 2019, the night we lost 3 days of footage, the night that changed everything." For years, fans had speculated about a mysterious incident during season 21. An entire investigation was filmed but never aired. Official statements blamed technical difficulties, equipment failure, but crew members who worked that night refused to discuss it, some signing NDAs, others simply going silent, until now. In the video, Zak reveals what actually happened. They had been investigating an abandoned psychiatric hospital in rural Montana, a place with documented deaths, alleged abuse, and decades of suffering soaked into the walls. During the lockdown, something unprecedented occurred. Every camera simultaneously recorded the same figure, a 7-foot shadow with elongated limbs standing at the end of a corridor. But here's what made everyone's blood run cold. The figure was facing away from the cameras, watching Zak. What followed was captured on audio, but the video mysteriously corrupted. Zak's voice, speaking in a language the crew didn't recognize. When they reviewed the audio later with a linguistics expert, the translation came back as medieval Latin, a dialect used by exorcists in the 14th century. Zak has no training in Latin. He couldn't explain how he knew the words. The network made a decision that night. The footage would be destroyed, backups erased, and everyone present would sign agreements never to speak about it. But Zak kept a copy. And now, 6 years later, he's releasing it. Before Ghost Adventures became a cultural phenomenon, Zak Bagans was a wedding videographer in Detroit. Few people know this. He spent his early 20s filming ceremonies, receptions, couples' first dances. Ordinary life, safe work. But something happened in 2004 that set him on an entirely different path. During an overnight edit session at his apartment, Zak claims he saw something that shouldn't have existed. A full-bodied apparition of a woman in Victorian-era clothing standing in his hallway. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at him with hollow eyes before vanishing. That encounter obsessed him. He spent the next 2 years researching the paranormal, attending seances, visiting allegedly haunted locations. By 2006, he had pitched the concept for Ghost Adventures. The show launched in 2008 with a documentary-style pilot that won critical acclaim. Unlike other paranormal shows that relied on jump scares and manufactured drama, Ghost Adventures felt authentic, raw. The fear in Zak's voice when he called out to the darkness wasn't acting, it was genuine terror mixed with fascination. Viewers responded. Within 3 seasons, the show became one of the Travel Channel's highest-rated programs. But success came with consequences. As Ghost Adventures gained popularity, Zak's personal life began to crumble. His marriage ended in 2012, his wife later admitting in an interview that she couldn't compete with his obsession. Friends from his pre-fame life slowly drifted away, disturbed by his increasingly erratic behavior. He started collecting cursed objects, items that most paranormal investigators won't even touch. Dolls possessed by malevolent entities, mirrors that supposedly drove their previous owners to madness, objects tied to murders, suicides, ritualistic abuse. By 2017, when the Haunted Museum opened, Zak had amassed one of the largest collections of allegedly cursed artifacts in the world. Over 30 rooms filled with objects that paranormal experts warned him to destroy. He didn't listen. Instead, he built an empire around them, charging admission, filming specials, turning human suffering and supernatural horror into entertainment. People who worked closely with Zak during this period describe a man consumed by something he couldn't control. He would spend 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours alone in the museum, walking the halls, talking to objects as if they could respond. Security footage from 2019 shows him standing motionless in front of the Dybbuk box for over 2 hours, not blinking, barely breathing. When confronted about it, he claimed he was listening. Aaron Goodwin, Billy Tolley, and Jay Wasley weren't just Zak's co-hosts. They were his closest friends, men who had followed him into some of the darkest locations on Earth. Together, they had investigated over 200 allegedly haunted sites, confronted entities that terrified even seasoned paranormal researchers, and built a brotherhood forged in shared fear and adrenaline. But by 2023, cracks in that brotherhood had become impossible to ignore. Aaron stopped appearing in behind-the-scenes content. Billy's social media showed him distancing himself from the show's themes, posting instead about family and faith. Jay gave an interview where he cryptically stated, "There are some places you can't come back from, some things you shouldn't chase." Then came the incident that nobody was supposed to know about. During a museum lockdown in October 2024, cameras captured something that forced the network to intervene. Multiple sources, speaking anonymously, describe footage of Zak becoming violent during a ritual. He allegedly attacked Aaron, claiming he saw something dark inside him. The crew had to physically restrain Zak until he collapsed, unconscious. When he woke up hours later, he had no memory of the incident. Medical tests revealed elevated cortisol levels, signs of extreme psychological stress, but nothing that explained the violent outburst. A neurologist who examined him off the record later told a friend, "I've seen trauma patients with more stability. Whatever is happening to him, it's not physical, it's something else." After that night, production was suspended indefinitely. The crew was told it was for creative restructuring, but insiders knew the truth. They were trying to figure out what to do about Zak. Aaron refused to film with him anymore unless a mental health professional was present. Billy demanded that certain artifacts be removed from the museum entirely. Jay simply said he was taking time to pray. The silence from the crew wasn't just professional courtesy, it was fear. They had seen something in Zak that night, something that convinced them he was no longer in control, and whatever had taken hold of him was getting stronger. When the Haunted Museum first opened its doors in October 2017, it was marketed as an educational experience, a place where visitors could learn about the history of the paranormal, view authenticated artifacts, and understand the cultural significance of supernatural beliefs across different eras and civilizations. The initial tours were relatively tame, informative. Even skeptics found the historical context fascinating. But something changed in early 2020. New acquisitions started arriving, objects Zak wouldn't discuss publicly. Entire rooms were closed off to tours, accessible only to Zak and a select few researchers. Staff members reported increasingly disturbing experiences. One tour guide claimed she saw shadows moving independently of any light source. Another quit after 3 visitors fainted during a single tour, all in the same room, all describing the same sensation of being choked. By 2022, the museum had developed a reputation that went beyond typical ghost story fare. Paranormal investigators from around the world began reporting that merely visiting the museum left them with lasting effects: nightmares, sleep paralysis. Some claimed they saw figures in their homes that resembled objects from Zak's collection. A psychic medium who toured the basement level said she refused to ever return, describing an overwhelming presence of concentrated malevolence unlike anything she had encountered in 30 years of professional work. Then there were the deaths. Between 2021 and 2024, 4 people who had worked at the museum died under circumstances that raised questions. A security guard suffered a sudden cardiac arrest at age 32 with no prior health issues. A maintenance worker drove his car off a bridge 3 weeks after cleaning a sealed storage room. A researcher committed suicide, leaving a note that simply read, "I can't make them stop talking." And a tour coordinator died in her sleep, her neighbor reporting that she had been screaming about the woman in white for hours before suddenly going silent. Zak never publicly connected these deaths to the museum, but privately, according to sources close to him, he became obsessed with finding a way to seal the energy inside the building. He consulted with priests, shamans, occultists, anyone who claimed to have knowledge of spiritual protection. None of their methods worked. If anything, the activity intensified. By late 2024, entire sections of the museum were off-limits even to staff. Zak installed industrial locks on certain doors, kept the keys on his person at all times, and allegedly slept inside the museum several nights a week, despite owning multiple properties in Las Vegas. Neighbors of the museum reported hearing sounds at night, screaming, banging, music playing at volumes that shook windows. When police were called, they found nothing, just Zak, alone, insisting he was conducting research. Every successful paranormal show has footage that never makes it to air. Technical glitches, moments too boring for television, scenes that don't fit the narrative. But Ghost Adventures had something else. An archive of material so disturbing that network executives made the unprecedented decision to not just shelve it, but actively destroy it. A former editor who worked on seasons 18 through 22 broke their NDA in early 2025, speaking to a paranormal podcast under the condition of anonymity. They described footage that violated basic laws of physics, objects moving without explanation, voices responding to questions in real time with information no living person could know, and most disturbing, footage of Zak's face changing during investigations. His eyes rolling back, his voice dropping several octaves, his entire demeanor transforming into something unrecognizable. The editor claimed that during one investigation at a former sanatorium, cameras captured Zak speaking fluent Romanian despite having no knowledge of the language. He recited details about patients who had died in the building over a century ago, information that was later verified through historical records that weren't publicly available. When he came out of the trance-like state, he had no memory of what he had said, but the footage that ultimately led to the network's intervention came from a lockdown at an abandoned church in Louisiana. Multiple cameras simultaneously captured what appeared to be a full-body apparition materializing behind Zak. Not a shadow, not a trick of light. A solid, three-dimensional figure that moved with purpose and intelligence. It placed its hand on Zak's shoulder, and he smiled. The crew reviewing the footage reported immediate adverse effects. Headaches, nausea. One production assistant quit on the spot, claiming she felt something watching her through the screen. The decision was made within 24 hours. The footage would be destroyed. The investigation would never be mentioned, and everyone involved would sign ironclad NDAs. But Zak kept copies. According to the anonymous editor, he stored them in a personal archive, claiming they were proof of something he couldn't yet fully explain. Those copies, or at least portions of them, allegedly formed the basis of the encrypted file that surfaced in December 2025. In early 2025, Zak Bagans simply disappeared from public life. No announcements, no farewell posts. One day he was actively promoting upcoming museum events and new episodes, and the next, silence. His social media accounts went dark. The museum closed for what was labeled as extensive renovations. Ghost Adventures stopped production with no official explanation. For weeks, fans speculated. Some thought it was a publicity stunt. Others feared he had suffered a mental breakdown. A few claimed to have insider information suggesting health issues. But the truth, as it often is with Zak Bagans, was far stranger than anyone imagined. According to multiple sources who spoke to entertainment journalists on background, Zak had checked himself into a private facility in Northern California. Not a hospital, not a rehabilitation center, a specialized compound run by a group that described themselves as spiritual deprogrammers. People who work with individuals who have become, as they termed it, entangled with non-human intelligence. A former employee of this facility later confirmed that someone matching Zak's description had been a resident for approximately 6 weeks in early 2025. The treatment involved isolation, ritualistic cleansing, and extensive psychological evaluation. The goal was to separate the person from whatever entity or energy had attached itself to them during their paranormal work, but Zak left before completing the program. According to the source, he became agitated during a session, claiming that separating from the entity would mean losing everything I've built. He checked himself out against medical advice and returned to Las Vegas. Within days, he was back inside the museum, alone. Neighbors reported seeing lights moving through the building at all hours. Security footage, later leaked online, showed Zak pacing the halls, talking to himself, sometimes screaming at nothing. On one occasion, he was filmed carrying what appeared to be the Dybbuk box through the museum, placing it in different rooms as if searching for the right location. Friends who managed to reach him by phone described a man who sounded defeated but defiant. He insisted he was close to understanding something fundamental about the nature of consciousness and the afterlife. He claimed the entities he had encountered weren't demons or ghosts, but something far more complex, intelligences that existed outside human perception of time and space, and they had chosen him as a conduit. The encrypted video file surfaced exactly 1 week after Zak's 48th birthday. In it, he appears drastically different from the confident investigator millions of viewers knew. His face is gaunt. Dark circles under his eyes suggest weeks of sleepless nights. He speaks in measured, deliberate tones, as if carefully choosing every word. "I need to tell you something I should have admitted years ago," he begins. begins. Ghost Adventures was never just entertainment. It was a ritual. Every investigation, every lockdown, every time we provoked entities in the dark, we were opening doors. And I was too arrogant, too obsessed with proof to understand what that meant. He describes a progression that started with simple curiosity and evolved into something he calls metaphysical addiction. The more he encountered, the more he needed to encounter. Each investigation had to be more extreme, more dangerous, more likely to produce evidence. He admits that he pushed his crew into situations he knew were unsafe, dismissed warnings from religious advisors, and ignored every sign that he was losing control. But the most chilling revelation comes when he discusses the Dybbuk box, perhaps the most famous cursed object in his collection. He confesses that he never fully sealed it after purchasing it in 2018. The ritual performed on camera was incomplete, deliberately so. He wanted to see what would happen if the entity inside had limited freedom. "I thought I could control it," he says, his voice breaking. "I thought I was the one asking questions, but it was studying me, learning, waiting." He claims that by 2022, he could no longer distinguish between his own thoughts and what he calls the influence. Decisions he made, objects he acquired, investigations he pursued, all of it felt guided by something outside his conscious will. He describes waking up in different rooms of the museum with no memory of how he got there, finding notes in his handwriting discussing rituals he never researched, hearing his own voice speaking when his mouth was closed. The video ends with a warning. "If you're watching this," Zak says, staring directly into the camera, "then I'm either dead or something worse has happened. The museum needs to be destroyed. Every object inside it needs to be properly sealed or destroyed by people who understand what they're dealing with. I built a monument to darkness, and now it's consuming me. Don't let it spread beyond these walls." The screen goes black. The file ends. Within hours of the video spreading through production circles, the paranormal community erupted. Demonologists, priests, and paranormal researchers who had warned about the dangers of Zak's methods for years felt validated. Others accused him of staging an elaborate hoax to revive interest in a franchise that had lost momentum. The Travel Channel released a terse statement. "We are aware of unauthorized material circulating online. We cannot verify its authenticity and have no comment at this time." Behind the scenes, sources say the network launched an internal investigation to determine how the footage leaked and whether Zak himself was responsible. Aaron Goodwin broke his silence in a now-deleted Instagram post. "I love Zak like a brother, but some bridges once crossed can't be uncrossed. I pray he finds peace." Billy Tolley and Jay Wasley remained silent, though both updated their social media bios to remove any mention of Ghost Adventures. But the most disturbing development came from the Las Vegas Police Department. In late December 2025, they were called to the haunted museum after neighbors reported screaming and what sounded like breaking glass. When officers arrived, they found the front door unlocked. Inside, furniture was overturned. Objects lay shattered on the floor, but Zak was nowhere to be found. His phone, wallet, and car keys were still inside. Security footage showed him entering the museum at 11:47 p.m. the previous night, but there was no footage of him leaving. Every exit was locked from the inside. There was no evidence of forced entry or exit. He simply vanished. Police classified it as a missing person case, but those familiar with Zak's work saw darker possibilities. Paranormal investigators pointed to historical cases of people who had become too entangled with malevolent forces simply ceasing to exist. Skeptics argued he staged his own disappearance, possibly fleeing to avoid legal or financial troubles. The museum remains closed, its future uncertain. Some call for it to be demolished. Others want it preserved as a cautionary tale. But everyone agrees on one thing. Whatever Zak Bagans unleashed during his 2 decades of paranormal investigation, it didn't end with his disappearance. It's still there, waiting in the dark halls of a Gothic mansion in Las Vegas, surrounded by objects that should never have been collected. 3 weeks after Zak vanished, a package arrived at the Travel Channel's headquarters in Los Angeles. No return address, no postage. Security footage showed no one delivering it. It simply appeared on the reception desk between camera sweeps. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. The handwriting was identified as Zak's, but the message was disturbing in its clarity. "I was wrong about everything. They aren't ghosts. They aren't demons. There's something that's been waiting for us to build the technology to see them, and now that we have, they're coming through. The museum was just the beginning. Destroy this. Destroy everything. before it's too late. The USB drive reportedly contained hundreds of hours of footage, investigations that never aired, private recordings from inside the museum, and according to one person who saw them before the network confiscated the drive, videos of Zak speaking to the camera about entities that exist outside our dimension, waiting for humans to open enough doorways for them to cross over permanently. The truth, as he always said, finds its way through the dark. Zak Bagans doesn't scare easily. 2 decades investigating the paranormal, hundreds of haunted locations, provoking spirits in asylums and prisons, spending nights where people died violently. He's built a career on fearlessness, but there's one case he admits still terrifies him. One investigation that crossed from entertainment to genuine threat. One location that left permanent scars on everyone who entered. For years, Zak stayed silent. He'd deflect questions, change subjects, avoid details, because talking about it, he says, stirs things up, brings it back, makes the nightmares return. But he's finally opened up about the case that changed everything, where people got hurt, where crew members quit, where Zak destroyed the location rather than risk anyone else experiencing what he witnessed. This is the Demon House investigation, the case that cost him his eyesight, the haunting that proved some places are evil beyond what cameras can capture. The house at 3860 Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana became nationally known in 2014 when reports of demonic possession emerged that were so extreme, so well documented by credible witnesses that they made international headlines. This wasn't your typical ghost story. Multiple families, multiple witnesses, medical professionals, police officers, and social workers all reported experiencing or witnessing phenomena that defied rational explanation. The core story centered on LaToya Ammons and her 3 children who rented the house in late 2011. What started as strange occurrences, footsteps, shadows, swarms of flies in winter, escalated into full-blown terror. The children exhibited behavior that their mother and witnesses described as possession, walking backward up walls, speaking in deep, inhuman voices, becoming violent with superhuman strength, eyes rolling back, convulsions, the kind of things that sound like horror movie fiction, except they were documented by people who had nothing to gain from lying. What made this case unique was the witness credibility. A registered nurse at a hospital where one of the children was examined wrote in official medical records that she witnessed the child walk backward up a wall. A Department of Child Services caseworker reported seeing phenomena she couldn't explain. Gary police officers filed reports describing encounters with what they believed were demonic entities. These weren't paranormal enthusiasts or attention seekers. These were professionals who risked their careers and reputations by going on record. The case attracted national media attention. News outlets sent reporters to investigate. Paranormal researchers documented the phenomena, and eventually, Zak Bagans heard about it. For someone who'd built his career on investigating the most haunted locations in America, this seemed like the Holy Grail. A case with credible witnesses, official documentation, and claims of demonic activity that went beyond typical haunting reports. It was everything he'd been searching for. Evidence that the demonic was real, documentable, and provable. In January 2014, Zak made a decision that would haunt him for years. He bought the house, not to live in, not as an investment, but as the centerpiece of a documentary that would, he hoped, provide definitive proof of demonic possession. He paid $35,000 in cash, sight unseen, and immediately began planning an investigation that would be more comprehensive, more scientific, more documented than anything Ghost Adventures had attempted. He wanted to capture what happened in that house. He wanted evidence that would convince skeptics. He wanted to prove the demonic was real. But from the moment Zak took ownership, things started going wrong. Equipment malfunctioned in ways that veteran crew members had never experienced. People who entered the house reported feeling ill, experiencing sudden personality changes, having violent impulses. One crew member quit before filming even began, saying the house made him feel suicidal. These weren't dramatic claims for attention. These were experienced professionals who'd investigated hundreds of locations walking away because something about this house felt genuinely dangerous. Zak later admitted he ignored the warnings. He'd spent years investigating haunted places without serious consequences. He thought he understood the risks, thought he could handle whatever was in that house, thought that with proper precautions and experienced crew, they could document the demonic without becoming victims of it. He was wrong, catastrophically, devastatingly wrong, and the price for that arrogance would be paid by everyone involved in the investigation. When Zak Bagans and his crew entered the demon house for the first investigation, they brought everything: multiple camera systems, audio recording equipment, EMF detectors, thermal imaging, motion sensors. They also brought a priest for blessing and protection, a psychic medium to assess the spiritual atmosphere, and a demonologist who'd studied cases of possession for decades. They weren't taking chances, or so they thought. The house itself was unimpressive from the outside. Small, run-down, indistinguishable from hundreds of other working-class homes in Gary, Indiana. But inside, Zak said, the atmosphere was immediately oppressive, not cold, which is what paranormal investigators typically report in haunted locations. This was heavy, like pressure pushing down from all directions. Several crew members reported difficulty breathing. Others felt sudden overwhelming anger or sadness with no apparent cause. The investigation followed standard Ghost Adventures protocols initially: EMF sweeps to detect electromagnetic anomalies, thermal imaging to capture temperature variations, EVP sessions attempting to communicate with whatever entities might be present. But within the first hour, things started happening that weren't standard at all. Equipment began malfunctioning simultaneously. Cameras that had been working perfectly outside died the moment they entered certain rooms. Batteries drained instantly despite being fully charged minutes before. Then came the physical manifestations. Crew members reported being touched, pushed, scratched by invisible forces. One investigator collapsed suddenly, conscious but unable to move or speak for several minutes. When he recovered, he had no memory of what happened, but reported feeling like something had been inside him, controlling him. The medical evaluation later showed no physical cause for the collapse, no seizure, no stroke, no medical explanation, just sudden loss of bodily control that resolved as mysteriously as it began. But the incident that shook Zak most during that first investigation involved the demonologist they'd brought for expertise and protection. Father Michael, a Catholic priest with decades of experience performing exorcisms, entered the basement where much of the reported demonic activity had occurred. He began prayers of blessing, standard procedure for sanctifying a space. Within minutes, his demeanor changed completely. His voice dropped to a guttural growl. His eyes, witnesses reported, went black, and he lunged at Zak with clear, violent intent. It took 3 men to restrain Father Michael. He was fighting with strength that seemed impossible for a man his age and size, screaming in languages that those present didn't recognize. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Father Michael collapsed, exhausted, with no memory of what had happened. When shown footage of his behavior, he wept. Said in 40 years of dealing with the demonic, he'd never been overcome like that. Never lost control. Never felt something take him over so completely and so quickly. That incident changed the entire investigation. This wasn't going to be a standard Ghost Adventures episode where they captured some EVPs and thermal anomalies. This was actively dangerous. Whatever was in that house wasn't just present. It was aggressive, intelligent, and powerful enough to overcome even people who'd spent their lives fighting demonic forces. Zak made the decision to continue, but with enhanced protocols. More protection, more precautions, shorter exposure times for crew members. But the damage he'd later realize was already done. The moment they entered that house, something attached itself to the investigation, and it wasn't going to let go. Over the weeks of investigation, the demon house stopped being just a location and became something more like a living, malevolent presence that seemed to target anyone who entered. Crew members started experiencing problems that extended beyond the investigation periods. Nightmares, sleep paralysis, sudden health issues with no medical explanation, relationships falling apart, financial disasters. One cameraman reported that his previously happy marriage dissolved into constant fighting within days of filming at the house. Zak himself began experiencing phenomena that terrified him. He'd wake up unable to move, feeling pressure on his chest, seeing shadow figures in his room. Equipment in his own home began malfunctioning, and then came the physical symptoms. His vision started deteriorating in ways that doctors couldn't explain. He developed diplopia, permanent double vision, that required him to wear prism glasses for the rest of his life. Medical examinations found no cause, no injury, no disease, no genetic condition. His eyes had simply stopped working correctly. Zak has been adamant in interviews that his vision problems are directly connected to the demon house. He points out the timing, the sudden onset during filming, the lack of medical explanation. Skeptics argue correlation doesn't prove causation, that medical issues can develop spontaneously. But Zak knows what he experienced, and the vision damage is permanent, undeniable proof that something happened to him during that investigation, something that left lasting physical harm. But the scariest incidents didn't happen to Zak. They happened to people who were just doing their jobs, who had no belief in the paranormal, who were simply working on a film production. A local man hired to help with some repairs at the house became violently ill after spending a few hours there. He ended up hospitalized with organ failure that doctors couldn't explain, recovered eventually but never fully, and he swears to this day that something in that house attached itself to him and tried to kill him. Then there was the incident that almost made Zak shut down the entire production. A crew member, we'll call him Chris, was alone in the house for less than 5 minutes setting up equipment. When the team returned, they found him sitting on the floor, staring at nothing, unresponsive. When he finally snapped out of it, he reported that time had passed differently for him. What felt like minutes to everyone else felt like hours to Chris. And during that time, he said, something had shown him things, visions of violence, death, evil, beyond description. He quit that day, refused to return, refused to even discuss what he'd seen. The psychological toll on the entire crew became evident. People who'd worked on ghost adventures for years, who'd investigated hundreds of locations without issue, started showing signs of serious trauma, anxiety, depression, paranoia. Some sought therapy, others turned to medication. The production insurance company actually pulled coverage partway through filming because they deemed the location too dangerous. That's unprecedented in television production. Insurance companies don't walk away from profitable shows without serious cause. Zak realized too late that he'd unleashed something he couldn't control. This wasn't a haunting you could document and walk away from. This was an active, intelligent force that was hurting people, and he felt responsible. Every person who got sick, every crew member who had nightmares, every life that was disrupted, it was because Zak had bought that house and brought people into contact with whatever evil lived there. That guilt, he's admitted, weighs on him more than any ghost ever could. The Demon House documentary was eventually completed and released in 2018, 4 years after Zak bought the property. But what most viewers don't know is how much footage didn't make it into the final cut. Not because it wasn't compelling, but because it was too disturbing, too real, too potentially harmful to broadcast. Zak has hinted in interviews about footage that even he won't watch anymore. Recordings from that house that show things he wishes he'd never captured. Audio recordings from the basement captured voices that sound undeniably inhuman, not the whispered EVPs that paranormal shows typically feature. Clear, loud voices speaking in what linguists identified as ancient languages, saying things that, when translated, were threats, warnings, promises of violence. One audio clip allegedly captured something claiming to be a demon that had been at that location for centuries, feeding on the misery of families who lived there. Video footage showed phenomena that defied explanation, objects moving on their own, not the subtle shifts that can be explained by vibration or air movement, large items lifting and flying across rooms, doors slamming with enough force to crack frames, and in one particularly disturbing sequence, a shadow figure that appeared to have human-like form but moved in ways that violated physics, crawling on walls, twisting at impossible angles, moving so fast it appeared as a blur even on high-speed cameras. But the footage that apparently disturbed Zak most involved the possessions. Multiple people caught on camera undergoing what appeared to be genuine demonic influence, eyes rolling back, bodies contorting, voices changing, speaking in languages they didn't know. And unlike Hollywood dramatizations, these were real people, not actors, experiencing genuine terror. One woman who agreed to be interviewed about her experiences in the house began showing signs of possession during filming. Her segment had to be stopped when she became violent, requiring multiple people to restrain her. Zak has said that watching that footage back was one of the hardest things he's ever done, seeing someone he'd brought into that environment being hurt, being overtaken by something evil, knowing he was responsible for putting her in that situation. The woman recovered after prayers and spiritual intervention, but she sued the production, claiming the experience left her with lasting psychological trauma. The case was settled out of court. Details remain confidential, but Zak has said publicly that he doesn't blame her. He'd put her in harm's way pursuing evidence of the paranormal. She paid the price. Perhaps most disturbing were the recordings that captured things happening when nobody was in the house. Motion-activated cameras caught figures moving through rooms. Thermal imaging showed heat signatures that appeared and disappeared without corresponding physical physical presence, and audio recorders left running overnight captured hours of sounds, footsteps, voices, screams, furniture being moved. When crew members reviewed the footage the next morning, the house appeared undisturbed. Nothing physically moved, but the audio and video evidence showed activity that lasted all night. The evidence collected at the Demon House, Zak has said, is the most compelling he's ever captured. It's proof, as much as proof can exist, that demonic forces are real and can interact with the physical world. But it's proof that came at too high a cost. Proof that required people to suffer. Proof that Zak wishes he'd never sought because the price of knowing, of proving, was too high. Some mysteries, he learned, aren't worth solving. Some evidence isn't worth the lives it damages in the collection. After months of investigation, after witnessing people get hurt, after his own health deteriorated, Zak Bagans made a decision that shocked the paranormal community. He was going to destroy the Demon House. Not sell it, not turn it into a tourist attraction or museum exhibit like his haunted artifacts. Destroy it completely. Eliminate the location so nobody else could be harmed by whatever evil inhabited that property. The decision wasn't easy. From a business perspective, it was insane. The house had become internationally famous. Paranormal tourists would have paid significant money to tour it. Other paranormal shows were requesting permission to investigate. Zak could have made substantial profit from that property for years, but he couldn't ethically justify allowing more people to be exposed to what he'd experienced. Couldn't risk more injuries, more possessions, more lives being destroyed by whatever demonic presence lived there. In January 2016, 2 years after purchasing the property, Zak had the Demon House demolished. Professional demolition crew, not just tearing it down, but grinding the debris, removing every piece of the structure, treating the site like a toxic waste cleanup. The crew reported feeling uncomfortable during the demolition. Equipment broke down repeatedly. Workers reported feeling watched, feeling oppressed, but eventually the house was gone, reduced to rubble and hauled away. But destroying the physical structure didn't end the haunting. Zak has admitted that even after the house was demolished, he continued experiencing phenomena. The nightmares continued, his vision problems persisted and worsened, and he carried a sense of dread, a feeling that something from that house was still attached to him, that by investigating it, by owning it, by spending so much time in its presence, he'd created a connection that destroying the building couldn't sever. Other people involved in the investigation reported similar ongoing issues. Years after filming ended, crew members were still dealing with health problems, relationship difficulties, psychological trauma. Some sought spiritual intervention, priests who performed cleansing rituals, exorcists who attempted to break whatever attachments had formed. Results were mixed. Some felt relief, others continued struggling. The Demon House had left scars that weren't easily healed. Zak's decision to destroy the house was controversial in paranormal research circles. Some investigators accused him of eliminating valuable evidence, of preventing scientific study of a legitimately haunted location. Others supported his choice, arguing that some places are too dangerous to preserve, that protecting people mattered more than advancing paranormal research. Zak stood by his decision, said that if he could go back, he'd never buy that house, never investigate it, never expose himself and his crew to what lived there. For years after the Demon House investigation, Zak Bagans avoided discussing it in detail. He'd mention it briefly on podcasts, deflect interview questions, keep the conversation surface level, because talking about it, he said, made things worse, brought the memories back too vividly, stirred up whatever connection remained between him and that place. Some investigators who work with the demonic believe that discussing cases can reopen spiritual doorways, can invite entities back into your life. Zak believed that, and he was terrified of what might happen if he spoke too openly about his experiences. But silence came with its own cost. People who followed ghost adventures wanted to know what made the Demon House different, why Zak had destroyed it instead of exploiting it. What had happened that was so terrible it made the fearless ghost hunter walk away. The speculation and rumors became so pervasive that Zak realized staying silent was creating more problems than it solved, so he began carefully to open up about the investigation and its lasting impact on his life. In interviews conducted for the documentary release and in subsequent appearances, Zak described the Demon House as the most significant and most traumatic investigation of his career. He talked about the physical toll, the permanent damage to his vision, the psychological impact, the nightmares and paranoia that persisted years after filming ended, and the guilt, the overwhelming sense of responsibility for everyone who'd been hurt because he'd bought that house and invited them into its evil. Zak's willingness to discuss his fear, his trauma, his regret was significant. For someone who'd built a brand on fearlessness, on confronting the paranormal without hesitation, admitting that one case had genuinely terrified him was vulnerable. But that vulnerability, he hoped, would serve as warning, would prevent other investigators, amateur or professional, from making the same mistakes he'd made, from thinking they could handle demonic forces without consequences. He's been particularly emphatic about one message. Some places should not be investigated. Some hauntings are not entertainment. When you're dealing with genuinely demonic forces, forces that have the power to possess, harm, and destroy, the risk isn't worth any amount of evidence or any level of proof. The demon house proved to him that the paranormal isn't just about ghosts and cold spots. It can be actively evil, genuinely dangerous, capable of ruining lives. Zak has also spoken about how the investigation changed his approach to ghost adventures and paranormal investigation generally. He's more cautious now about demonic cases, more likely to decline investigations at locations with histories of possession or violent spiritual activity, more protective of his crew, refusing to put them in situations where genuine harm is likely. The demon house taught him that some evidence isn't worth the cost of obtaining it, that his responsibility to the people who work with him matters more than capturing compelling television. Years after the demon house was demolished, years after the documentary was released, Zak Bagans still lives with the consequences of that investigation. His vision problems are permanent. He wears prism glasses every day, a visible reminder of what happened in Gary, Indiana. The nightmares have decreased in frequency, but haven't stopped entirely, and he carries psychological scars that manifest as caution bordering on paranoia when dealing with potentially demonic cases. He's described the demon house as a warning that he'll carry for the rest of his life, a reminder that the paranormal world contains forces that are genuinely dangerous, that can cause lasting harm to body and mind. That his cavalier approach to investigating hauntings, his confidence that he could handle anything, was arrogance that nearly destroyed him and did destroy the lives of people who trusted him. The case changed how Zak is perceived in the paranormal community. Before the demon house, he was often criticized as too theatrical, too focused on drama and entertainment. After, many investigators gained new respect for him because he'd encountered something genuinely evil and had the courage to admit it had defeated him, had the integrity to destroy a potentially profitable property rather than exploit it for financial gain, had the honesty to warn others about dangers he'd learned about the hard way. But respect doesn't erase trauma. Zak has admitted in recent interviews that he wishes he'd never heard about the house on Carolina Street, wishes someone else had investigated it, wishes he'd listened to the warnings from people who'd experienced its evil firsthand, wishes he'd valued his health and his crew's safety more than his desire to capture definitive proof of the demonic. Those wishes can't change what happened, can't restore his vision or eliminate the nightmares or undo the harm done to everyone involved. But they represent growth, recognition that some pursuits aren't worth their cost. Ghost Adventures has filmed over 300 episodes across 15 years of paranormal investigation. Zak Bagans and his crew have locked themselves inside the world's most haunted prisons, asylums, hospitals, and private residences. They've been scratched, pushed, possessed, and terrorized by entities that most people don't believe exist. They've investigated locations where people died violently, where satanic rituals were performed, where children were abused and murdered. Through all of it, through every terrifying moment captured on camera, production never stopped. Until now, something happened during a recent investigation that forced the entire production to shut down mid-season. A crew member was hospitalized. Zak made emergency calls to demonologists. Legal teams got involved. Insurance companies threatened to pull all coverage, which would have ended the show permanently. This wasn't just another scary moment caught on camera for ratings and dramatic effect. This was a genuine safety crisis that threatened everyone involved with the production. After 15 years of pushing boundaries and provoking spirits in the darkest locations on Earth, something finally pushed back hard enough to stop them. What happened in that location was so severe, so genuinely dangerous that continuing the season became absolutely impossible. The crew member who was at the center of this incident has never spoken publicly about what he experienced, and according to sources close to the production, he never will. Some experiences change you permanently. Some things, once seen or felt, are better left in darkness. This is the story of the investigation that shut down Ghost Adventures. The location was a private residence in the Midwest that had been flagged by multiple paranormal research teams as extremely dangerous. This wasn't a historical building with tragic past events. This was a modern family home where something genuinely evil had taken up residence. 3 different families had lived in the house over a span of just 5 years. All 3 families fled, leaving behind furniture and possessions because staying another night wasn't worth the psychological trauma. Previous paranormal investigation teams had entered the property. Some refused to return return. Others reported experiences so disturbing they stopped investigating the paranormal entirely. Local Catholic clergy had been called to the home multiple times. Exorcism rituals were attempted. They failed. The activity escalated rather than diminished. Police reports documented dozens of calls from various residents over the years. Officers responding to disturbance calls reported experiencing equipment failures, unexplained sounds, and feelings of overwhelming dread. One officer filed an official report describing seeing a shadow figure move through a wall. The current homeowners contacted Ghost Adventures as a last resort. They described being physically attacked in their sleep, objects being thrown with violent force, voices making specific threats against family members, their children showing signs of possible possession, speaking in languages they'd never learned. When Zak and the production team reviewed the homeowners' documentation, they initially approached with standard protocols and confidence. They'd investigated worse locations before, or so they thought. The investigation began on a Friday evening in late summer. Full production crew on location, approximately 12 people including Zak, Aaron Goodwin, Billy Tolley, and Jay Wasley. The plan was a complete overnight lockdown investigation with the entire crew remaining inside until dawn. Within the first 30 minutes, problems began. Cameras malfunctioned despite fresh batteries and full charges. Digital recorders picked up voices immediately, too many to document properly. Temperature drops occurred in different rooms simultaneously despite it being summer with no air conditioning running. Multiple crew members reported feeling touched or pushed by invisible forces. Zak began experiencing symptoms he'd felt before during demonic investigations. Sudden violent nausea, pressure on his chest making breathing difficult, overwhelming rage that seemed to come from outside himself. Aaron Goodwin reported being pushed hard enough to stumble while standing in an empty hallway, captured clearly on camera. Billy Tolley's equipment was registering electromagnetic readings that exceeded anything he'd measured in 15 years of investigations. Then the situation escalated beyond anything they'd experienced before. Around 11 p.m., approximately 3 hours into the investigation, one of the camera operators suddenly collapsed in the upstairs master bedroom. Not fainting or losing balance, but a complete physical collapse, as if every muscle had stopped functioning simultaneously. He was conscious but unable to move any part of his body. His eyes were open and moving, showing clear distress and terror, but he couldn't speak or call for help. The crew members nearest to him immediately called for assistance. Zak and others rushed to his position. He remained on the floor, completely paralyzed, but clearly conscious and aware. His eyes were moving frantically, trying to communicate something. Then his expression changed entirely. His face contorted in a way that several crew members later described as inhuman. When he finally spoke, the voice that came out wasn't his own. It was deeper, older, and it knew things about crew members' personal lives that the camera operator had no way of knowing. That moment, captured on multiple cameras from different angles, was when everyone realized this investigation had crossed a line. Production was immediately halted. Emergency services were called despite the remote location. The camera operator, who we'll call David to protect his identity, was transported by ambulance to the nearest hospital, approximately 40 minutes away. Zak and several crew members followed in separate vehicles. At the hospital, medical staff ran comprehensive tests, CT scans, MRI, blood work, neurological examinations. Every test came back completely normal. There was no physical cause for his collapse or the paralysis he'd experienced, but David was reporting ongoing symptoms that had nothing to do with physical injury. He described feeling something inside him that wasn't part of himself. He experienced episodes where he felt his consciousness being pushed aside by another presence. Hospital staff initially treated it as a psychiatric emergency, but David's behavior was escalating in ways that medical explanations couldn't address. He would speak in voices that weren't his own, discussing things he couldn't possibly know. He demonstrated knowledge of hospital staff members' private lives, including details about their families and past traumas that were never disclosed to him. His physical strength became abnormal. It took multiple security personnel to restrain him during episodes. The attending physician, who'd worked in emergency medicine for over 20 years, privately told Zak that he'd never encountered anything like this. Medical science had no framework for what was happening. At that point, hospital administration made an unprecedented decision. They requested spiritual intervention, acknowledging that this was beyond the scope of conventional medicine. All cameras had been rolling during the incident at the house. The footage captured everything from multiple angles with synchronized timestamps. What the cameras showed was more disturbing than anyone watching in real time had fully comprehended. In the moments before David collapsed, multiple cameras captured him him, turning suddenly toward a specific corner of the room. His expression changed from concentration on his filming duties to what can only be described as abject terror. His body language shifted entirely. Then the collapse, captured from 3 different camera positions simultaneously. But the truly disturbing elements appeared when the footage was reviewed carefully. Enhanced audio analysis revealed a voice that wasn't David's speaking just before he fell. Thermal imaging cameras showed a heat signature near his position that had no physical source. Electromagnetic field meters registered a massive spike at the exact moment of collapse, going from baseline readings to off-the-scale measurements instantaneously. Other cameras positioned throughout the house captured what appeared to be a shadow figure in the background, present in multiple rooms simultaneously, which is physically impossible. This footage was unlike anything the show had ever captured. Multiple recording devices using different technologies, all confirming the same impossible event from different perspectives. There was no possibility of equipment malfunction because different systems showed corresponding anomalies. There was no natural explanation that could account for all the documented phenomena occurring simultaneously. The production team faced an immediate decision. Could this footage be aired on television? The legal department raised concerns. Showing what appeared to be genuine demonic possession of a crew member raised ethical questions about exploitation and consent. Could David, in his current state, consent to his trauma being broadcast? Did the network have liability if viewers were disturbed by content that was genuinely supernatural rather than entertainment? There were concerns that airing footage of apparent possession could inspire copycat incidents or attract dangerous attention to the show. After extensive legal review and consultation with religious experts who viewed the footage, the decision was made. The footage would not air in its complete form. Brief segments might be shown with heavy editing, but the full sequence would remain in archive. To this day, only a handful of people have seen the complete footage, and according to those who have viewed it, that's for the best. Zak Bagans has built his entire career on pushing boundaries and confronting the paranormal without hesitation. He's provoked spirits, challenged demons, and investigated locations that other teams refused to enter. Throughout 15 seasons of Ghost Adventures, through hundreds of investigations, he'd never shut down production early, never walked away from a location because it was too dangerous. His reputation was built on fearlessness and commitment to documenting the truth, regardless of personal cost. But David's collapse and possession changed something fundamental. For the first time in his career, Zak made the call to completely halt production. From the hospital, he contacted Travel Channel executives. He called demonologists he'd worked with previously. He consulted with religious authorities, and he made the decision. The investigation was over. The remaining scheduled locations for the season would be postponed indefinitely. The crew would not return to that house under any circumstances. Some people questioned his decision, including network executives who'd invested heavily in the season. The financial implications were severe. Locations had been scouted, contracts signed, production scheduled months in advance. Shutting down mid-season meant losing hundreds of thousands of dollars and potentially damaging relationships with the network. But Zak stood firm. His reasoning was simple. Crew safety mattered more than content, more than ratings, more than his reputation for never backing down. He'd seen something in that house and in David's possession that convinced him they'd encountered something genuinely evil, something beyond his ability to control or protect his crew from. Ghost Adventures, like all television productions, operates under comprehensive insurance coverage. That insurance protects against crew injuries, equipment damage, and liability for investigating dangerous locations. The insurance company's risk management team reviewed footage of the incident. They consulted with medical experts, safety professionals, and, surprisingly, paranormal researchers. Their concern was simple. Did the production team take adequate precautions? Were proper safety protocols followed? Could this incident have been prevented? If they determined that Ghost Adventures had violated safety standards or deliberately put crew members at risk, they could pull coverage. Without insurance, filming would be legally impossible. The entire show would end, not just the current season. Insurance investigators interviewed every crew member present during the incident. They reviewed all footage, not just from the night of David's collapse, but from previous episodes investigating demonic locations. They were building a case about whether the show had established a pattern of reckless behavior. Some crew members, shaken by what happened to David, were considering leaving the show entirely. Others refused to return to the house even to retrieve equipment that had been left behind. Union representatives got involved, raising questions about workplace safety and paranormal investigation. The situation had evolved from a single terrifying incident into a full-scale production crisis. Every aspect of Ghost Adventures was being scrutinized scrutinized, questioned, potentially dismantled by forces that Zak couldn't confront with provocation or bravery. While the business crisis unfolded, David remained hospitalized and his condition was deteriorating rather than improving. The presence inside him was becoming stronger, more dominant. Hospital staff had never dealt with anything like this. Medical interventions were ineffective because there was nothing medically wrong. This required spiritual intervention of a type that modern hospitals aren't equipped to provide. A Catholic priest was brought to the hospital after consultation with the diocese. He performed a preliminary assessment and confirmed what everyone had begun to suspect. David was suffering from genuine demonic possession, not psychological trauma, not mental illness, but actual spiritual oppression by an inhuman entity. The decision was made to perform a full exorcism rite. This wasn't the dramatic Hollywood version. It was a serious religious ritual. Multiple sessions were required over several days. During these sessions, David displayed impossible physical strength, speaking in languages he'd never studied, revealing information he couldn't have known through natural means. The entity identified itself and spoke of things that terrified even the experienced priest performing the ritual. Crew members who visited David during this period described his voice changing completely, his face contorting in inhuman ways, his eyes showing something looking out that wasn't David at all. This was never filmed. The Catholic Church required privacy for the ritual. Zak honored that requirement despite his instinct to document everything. Some things are too sacred, too serious to be turned into content. Eventually, after multiple sessions and intervention by additional religious authorities, the exorcism was successful. David was freed from the possession, but he was permanently changed by the experience. He could remember some of what happened, fragments of the entity's thoughts and intentions. Those memories haunted him in ways that no therapy could address. He left ghost adventures after his recovery. He refuses to discuss the experience publicly. According to those close to him, he's requested that his identity never be revealed. He wants no connection to paranormal investigation ever again. That silence, that absolute refusal to capitalize on or even discuss what happened to him speaks volumes. People who fake possession or exaggerate paranormal experiences want attention, want to tell their story. David wants only to forget. That more than anything else confirms that what happened to him was real and traumatic beyond description. An emergency production meeting was held involving Zak, senior producers, Travel Channel executives, insurance representatives, and legal advisors. The question on the table: what happens to Ghost Adventures? Arguments were made for continuing. The financial investment was substantial. Contractual obligations existed. Other locations were prepared and waiting. Some argued this was an opportunity to document unprecedented phenomena. But the arguments for shutting down were stronger. Crew safety had to be paramount. Legal liability was too high if something similar happened again. Insurance coverage was at risk of being pulled entirely. The psychological trauma to the team was real and ongoing. Ethical questions about exploitation had no good answers. After hours of discussion, the decision was made. The season would be officially suspended. Scheduled locations would be postponed indefinitely. A full investigation of the incident would be conducted. New safety protocols would need to be developed and implemented before filming could resume. The public announcement was carefully worded to reveal nothing specific. Production pause for comprehensive safety review was the official statement. No mention of possession, exorcism, or the real reasons behind the shutdown. Fans immediately began speculating. Something serious had happened. Ghost Adventures, a show that had never stopped for anything, had been forced to stop. The theories ranged from accurate to absurd, but the truth remained hidden, locked away in classified footage, medical records, and the traumatic memories of people who'd signed non-disclosure agreements. Ghost Adventures eventually returned to filming after a several-month hiatus, but the show was fundamentally changed. New safety protocols were implemented that would have seemed paranoid before David's possession. Religious experts were placed on standby during all investigations. Enhanced medical support became standard. Location vetting became much stricter, with certain types of properties being automatically rejected. Crew members were offered psychological counseling and spiritual protection resources. Most significantly, Zak's approach to investigation changed. The bravado and provocation that had defined his style was tempered with caution. Demonic cases were handled with more preparation and backup. Some locations that would have been investigated previously were declined because the risk outweighed any potential evidence. What the public doesn't know, what was never disclosed despite intense fan speculation, the full details of David's possession remain sealed. Complete medical records are protected. The unedited footage from that night is locked in secure storage. David's identity has never been revealed publicly. The exact location of of the house hasn't been disclosed to prevent copycat investigations. The entity's name and the specific things it revealed during the exorcism were never shared. Some information is too dangerous to release. Some knowledge invites attention from forces that shouldn't be provoked. Zak has spoken carefully about the incident in interviews. He's admitted it was the first time he questioned whether investigation was worth the risk to his crew. He's acknowledged new appreciation for the genuine danger of demonic cases. He's committed publicly to crew protection over content, and he's stated clearly that some locations shouldn't be investigated, something he would never have admitted before David's possession. The team has never returned to that house. The property remains occupied by the family who called them, still experiencing activity, still living with whatever evil resides there. They've learned to coexist with it because they have nowhere else to go. For 15 years, Ghost Adventures proved to millions of viewers that the paranormal was real, that spirits and entities exist beyond death. This incident proved something more disturbing. The paranormal isn't just real, it's genuinely dangerous. It can hurt you. It can change you. It can mark you permanently. And sometimes documentation isn't worth the cost of obtaining it. The crew member at the center of this incident, the man we've called David, has rebuilt his life far away from paranormal investigation and television production. He's never spoken publicly about what he experienced during those hours of possession. He's declined every interview request, turned down substantial financial offers from media outlets, refused to participate in documentaries about the incident. According to sources close to him, he's made peace with what happened in his own way. But he lives with the knowledge that something evil touched his soul, used his body, spoke through his voice. Some experiences are so profound, so violent, that silence is the only appropriate response. That silence, more than any testimony or interview could accomplish, confirms the reality of what happened. This is why Ghost Adventures shut down. This is the incident that proved some investigations have consequences that last forever. Aaron Goodwin has been Zak Bagans' right-hand man on Ghost Adventures for over 15 years. He's been there for every single investigation, every paranormal encounter, every terrifying moment captured on camera. He's locked himself inside the world's most haunted prisons, asylums, hospitals, and private residences. He's been scratched, pushed, possessed, and terrorized by entities that most people refuse to believe exist. But here's what viewers don't know. There's always footage that doesn't make it to air, moments too disturbing for television, evidence too controversial to broadcast, personal conflicts too raw to show the public, and experiences so traumatic that even Aaron has stayed silent about them for over a decade until now. With a new season of Ghost Adventures scheduled to premiere soon, Aaron has started opening up about what really happens when the cameras stop rolling. He's revealing behind-the-scenes conflicts with Zak that have never been discussed publicly. He's talking about investigations that were too dangerous to fully air. He's describing encounters that left permanent psychological scars on him and the crew. He's detailing the specific incident during recent filming that almost made him quit the show entirely. And most significantly, he's warning viewers about what's coming in the new season, content that has him genuinely concerned for the first time in his career. After staying silent for over a decade, protecting the show's image and respecting non-disclosure agreements, Aaron Goodwin is finally revealing the truth about what Ghost Adventures doesn't show you. The real story behind 15 years of paranormal investigation, the personal cost nobody talks about, and why the upcoming season represents a turning point that has him questioning everything. Most viewers see Aaron and Zak as close friends, partners who've been through countless investigations together, sharing a bond forged in haunted locations across the world. The reality is significantly more complicated than what airs on television. Aaron started as a camera operator and technical guy, handling equipment while Zak led investigations. Over 15 years, he evolved into Zak's primary investigation partner, then co-lead investigator, and now holds a producer credit with creative input. But that evolution hasn't been smooth or without conflict. Aaron has revealed that creative differences frequently arise that never make it to screen. Disagreements about investigation approaches arguments about provocation tactics, and serious concerns about safety protocols that get overridden in pursuit of dramatic content for television ratings and network approval. Zak's need for absolute control over every aspect of production has created tension throughout their working relationship. Aaron has admitted there were times he wanted to leave investigations because he felt genuinely unsafe, but production requirements meant he couldn't simply walk away. The cameras keep rolling regardless of fear or danger. There's also the burden of being typecast as the scared one. Viewers expect Aaron to be terrified in every episode, Production sometimes emphasizes his fear reactions because that's what generates views and social media engagement. The psychological toll of being consistently portrayed this way, of having your genuine fear turned into entertainment, of struggling to be taken seriously as an investigator rather than just the guy who screams, that's something Aaron has carried for years. But the real breaking point in their relationship came during a recent investigation that won't air until the new season premieres. What viewers see in a typical Ghost Adventures episode represents a tiny fraction of what actually happens during investigations. Aaron explains that a standard investigation involves 12 to 16 hours of continuous filming. That massive amount of footage gets condensed into 42 minutes of television content for broadcast. Hours of compelling evidence, dramatic moments, and genuine paranormal activity end up on the cutting room floor, never to be seen by the public. Some of this is simply due to time constraints and the realities of television formatting, but much of it gets cut for other reasons that Aaron is now revealing. Evidence that's deemed too good to air because it would face immediate skeptic backlash and accusations of fabrication, crew arguments and conflicts that would break the fourth wall and shatter the illusion viewers have about the show, equipment failures that reveal how much technology struggle happens off camera, moments when fear becomes too real and crew members have genuine breakdowns that are too raw, too personal to broadcast as entertainment. Footage where crew safety was genuinely compromised in ways that would raise serious questions about production protocols and insurance liability. Aaron has mentioned specific examples in recent interviews. Full possessions that lasted much longer than the brief segments shown on television. Physical attacks more violent than what airs, with injuries that required medical attention but weren't deemed television appropriate. EVP recordings with content too disturbing, too threatening, too explicitly evil to broadcast under any network standards. Times when investigations were genuinely halted mid-filming because situations became too dangerous to continue safely. Multiple reasons explain why certain content never reaches viewers despite being documented on camera. Network broadcast standards prohibit content that's too intense, too graphic, or too potentially traumatizing. Legal liability concerns prevent showing situations where crew safety protocols might appear inadequate or reckless. Protecting crew members' privacy and dignity when they're having genuine emotional or psychological crises. Avoiding copycat situations where amateur investigators might attempt to recreate dangerous scenarios without proper preparation or protection. And maintaining the show's credibility with skeptics by not airing evidence so compelling it seems impossible to believe. But Aaron insists that this upcoming new season has more footage they fought to keep in the final cuts than any previous season in Ghost Adventures history. Content that pushes boundaries further than ever before. During filming for the new season, Aaron experienced an investigation that fundamentally changed his perspective on paranormal research and his own role in Ghost Adventures. The specific location hasn't been fully disclosed yet, but Aaron has described going into this investigation with his usual confidence built from hundreds of previous experiences. They'd investigated every type of haunted location imaginable. They felt prepared for anything the paranormal could present. Standard safety protocols were in place. Full crew support was available. But from the moment they arrived, something felt profoundly wrong in ways that Aaron's instincts immediately registered. The location had an oppressive atmosphere that affected everyone. Local residents refused to discuss the property or its history. Previous paranormal investigation teams had entered and fled, some refusing to ever investigate again. Historical documentation revealed multiple violent deaths at the location spanning decades. Recent reports from current property owners described ongoing physical attacks, objects thrown with impossible force, and voices making specific threats against family members. Aaron describes being separated from the main group during the investigation, which was planned isolation designed to increase paranormal response. But what he experienced during that separation was unlike anything in 15 years of investigating. Physical contact that left visible marks on his body, voice phenomena that revealed personal information about his life that no entity should know, an overwhelming sense of malevolent presence that made him question whether he would survive the night. Then came the specific moment that genuinely broke him, an incident Aaron can't fully describe yet because it will air as the climax of this season's most intense episode. He called for crew help using his radio and received no response. He felt genuinely trapped in that location with something that wanted to harm him. He believed for the first time in his career that he might not make it out safely. The eventual rescue by crew members and the immediate aftermath of that experience left Aaron shaken in ways that previous investigations never had. This matters for the new season because this episode will definitely air. Viewers will see Aaron's genuine terror captured in real time. The footage is more intense, more raw, more authentically frightening than anything Ghost Adventures has broadcast in 15 seasons. And Aaron admits publicly that he seriously considered quitting the show entirely after this investigation. Only conversations with crew, family, and spiritual advisors convinced him to continue. But he's making it clear, what viewers will see this season represents a threshold that's never been crossed before. The personal cost of 15 years investigating the paranormal is something Aaron rarely discussed publicly until recently. His life outside Ghost Adventures has been profoundly affected in ways viewers never see. Maintaining normal relationships becomes nearly impossible when you're regularly encountering genuine evil and trauma. Friends and family outside the paranormal investigation world don't understand the psychological toll of what he experiences. They can't comprehend why certain locations or experiences stay with you permanently. The challenge of switching off paranormal awareness after investigations, of returning to normal life when you've just spent hours confronting entities that want to harm you, that transition never gets easier. Aaron lives with constant awareness now, seeing signs and sensing presences in everyday locations that most people never notice. It changes how you move through the world. Sleep problems and mental health issues have plagued Aaron for years. Nightmares following specific investigations, sleep paralysis experiences where he feels held down by unseen forces, anxiety about what might have followed him home from haunted locations. He's sought therapy and developed coping mechanisms, but the cumulative psychological impact of sustained exposure to traumatic paranormal encounters doesn't simply disappear with treatment. Then came the personal crisis that nearly destroyed him. In 2021, Aaron's wife was arrested for allegedly plotting to hire someone to kill him. The stress of his career, the time away from home for investigations, the psychological changes he'd undergone, all contributed to the breakdown of his marriage in ways he's still processing. The Ghost Adventures crew supported him through this nightmare, but it made Aaron seriously reconsider whether continuing the show was worth the ongoing personal destruction it was causing. Beyond psychological trauma, there's the issue of spiritual attachments and phenomena following investigators home from location. Aaron has experienced paranormal activity in his own house that he directly attributes to things attaching to him during investigation. Family members have been affected by presences that Aaron believes followed him home. He's required multiple spiritual cleansings of his property and person over the years. Living with the knowledge that investigating the paranormal can mark you, can create connections with entities that don't respect the boundaries between investigation sites and your personal life, that's a burden Aaron carries constantly. Yet, despite everything, the personal costs and trauma and ongoing risks, Aaron continues with Ghost Adventures. He continues because he genuinely believes in documenting paranormal phenomena and feels responsibility to viewers seeking answers about the nature of existence and what happens after death. Not every location Ghost Adventures investigates becomes a regular episode. Some locations are permanently blacklisted, places the crew has collectively agreed never to return to, regardless of viewer interest or network pressure. These aren't decisions made lightly. They represent investigations where something went so wrong, where the danger became so real, where the consequences were so severe that returning would be unconscionably reckless. Aaron has started naming specific places that are forbidden. The private residence where a crew member experienced full demonic possession, requiring hospitalization and exorcism, a case that nearly ended the show. An abandoned hospital where catastrophic equipment failure in the middle of an investigation risked lives when they lost all lighting and communication simultaneously in a structurally unsafe building. A prison facility where something followed them out, manifesting in crew members' homes for months afterward. A private home where young children were still living, and the ethical concerns about potentially escalating activity that would affect innocent kids made further investigation impossible. An overseas location where local authorities actually intervened during filming and ordered them to leave immediately for reasons that were never fully explained. What happened at these locations ranges from physical attacks that left lasting injuries to equipment destroyed by unseen forces in ways that seemed deliberately malicious, to psychological breaks among crew members that required medical and psychiatric intervention. These blacklisted locations serve as constant reminders that paranormal investigation isn't entertainment despite how it's packaged for viewers. The new season, however, represents a return to pushing boundaries that had been established through hard experience. They're investigating location types they deliberately avoided, and Aaron has serious concerns about this direction. After 15 years and hundreds of investigations, Aaron's perspective on paranormal evidence has evolved in ways that complicate his role on Ghost Adventures. He started as a believer in ghosts and spirits, but maintained healthy skepticism about individual pieces of evidence. Over time, accumulated experiences convinced him beyond doubt that something paranormal exists and can be documented. But now he's entered a third phase, questioning not whether the paranormal is real, but what they're actually communicating with during investigations. Are they really making contact with deceased human spirits, or could some entities be non-human, demonic, or something else entirely? Do their investigation methods actually help spirits move on, or do they simply provoke entities and make situations worse for everyone involved? Are they opening doorways and creating connections that shouldn't exist, with consequences they can't predict or control? Certain categories of evidence have convinced Aaron completely. Physical phenomena that can't be faked, objects moving with no one near them, doors slamming when everyone is accounted for on camera, intelligent responses to specific questions, answers that demonstrate awareness of what was asked and provide relevant information revealed through EVPs or other communication that investigators couldn't have known through any normal means. Physical effects like scratches appearing on skin in real time while being filmed. Full-bodied apparitions captured on multiple cameras simultaneously from different angles. This evidence is real and documented, Aaron insists. But what troubles him now are questions about the nature of what they're documenting. He's investigated cases where provocation seemed to make paranormal activity worse, rather than simply documenting what was already there. Homeowners have reported that activity increased after Ghost Adventures investigated, sometimes dramatically and dangerously. Crew members, including Aaron himself, have suffered long-term effects from specific investigations that suggest something attached to them or marked them. Some evidence suggests intelligent deception by entities, deliberately manipulating investigators and providing false information. These concerns have led Aaron to push for different approaches in the new season. More emphasis on helping spirits and families rather than simply provoking for dramatic content. Consultation with religious experts and spiritual practitioners before investigating locations with demonic or negative histories. Enhanced protection protocols including prayer, blessing, and spiritual shielding for all participants. But there's tension between what Aaron believes is responsible investigation and what the network wants. They want the provocation, the confrontation, the aggressive challenging of entities. That's what generates the views and ratings. Aaron's caught between his evolving understanding of the dangers and delivering content that satisfies expectations. The upcoming new season represents the most extreme content Ghost Adventures has ever produced, according to Aaron's warnings. They've investigated more dangerous locations than previous seasons, prioritizing intensity over safety considerations. There's renewed focus on demonic investigation, deliberately seeking out locations with histories of possession, satanic activity, and malevolent entities. International locations with completely different spiritual traditions and paranormal rules that the crew doesn't fully understand. Private residences where families are currently living and experiencing ongoing physical attacks, raising ethical questions about whether their investigation might make situations worse. Aaron has mentioned specific investigations that concern him. A location where multiple people have died under mysterious circumstances over the past decade, with no natural explanation for the pattern of deaths. A property with extensively documented possession cases, where previous exorcisms failed and families continue suffering. A historical site with dark, violent history involving ritual murder and torture. A private home where family members are being physically attacked nightly, with children showing signs of spiritual oppression. An international location where local spiritual traditions warn that Western investigation methods could trigger catastrophic consequences. Aaron is concerned because he feels they're taking unnecessary risks in pursuit of content. The crew is showing signs of cumulative trauma after years of sustained exposure to paranormal investigation. Some locations genuinely should not be investigated by anyone, regardless of potential evidence. Network pressure is overriding safety concerns and experienced investigators' instincts. There's a pattern of escalation that worries him, each season having to be more extreme than the last to satisfy defy audience expectations. What will be different about this new season? More raw, less edited footage showing longer sequences of investigation without cuts. Extended investigation sequences that capture the full emotional and psychological progression of encounters rather than just dramatic highlights. Greater focus on crew members' personal reactions and struggles, showing the human cost of paranormal investigation. Enhanced equipment providing multiple angles and different spectrum documentation of every significant event. More emphasis on evidence analysis, bringing in experts to examine what was captured. But Aaron is also warning viewers that some episodes will be genuinely disturbing in ways previous seasons haven't been. This isn't entertainment suitable for everyone. Content may seriously affect sensitive viewers or those dealing with their own spiritual struggles. The episodes challenge fundamental belief systems about life, death, and what exists beyond our normal perception of reality. What viewers don't see is the full production crew that makes Ghost Adventures possible. It's not just Zak, Aaron, Billy, and Jay investigating alone. A typical investigation involves 15 to 20 people. Camera operators capturing multiple angles simultaneously. Audio technicians managing recording equipment and monitoring for EVPs in real time. Producers coordinating logistics and ensuring everything gets documented. Safety personnel monitoring for structural hazards and emergency situations. Medical support standing by for injuries or health emergencies. Security personnel controlling access and protecting equipment. These crew members experience the same paranormal phenomena as the on-camera personalities. They're in the same haunted locations, exposed to the same entities, facing the same dangers, but their reactions and experiences don't air. They receive no recognition for their bravery or acknowledgement of their trauma from the viewing public. Aaron has shared specific stories about behind-the-scenes crew experiences. The camera operator who quit immediately after the possession incident, unable to continue after witnessing what happened to a colleague. The audio technician who captured an EVP so threatening, so specifically personal, that it terrified him into requesting reassignment away from the show. A producer who witnessed a full-bodied apparition and struggled with the reality-shattering implications of what she'd seen. Security personnel who had to physically intervene during an investigation when a crew member was being attacked by unseen forces. Medical support being called for genuine emergencies. Not minor injuries, but serious health crises triggered by paranormal encounters. The toll on crew relationships is significant. They bond through shared trauma in ways that outsiders can't understand, but crew members have left due to psychological strain becoming unsustainable. The new season brings crew changes that Aaron finds concerning, with new members lacking experience. After 15 years of staying relatively silent about the darker aspects of Ghost Adventures, Aaron Goodwin is finally speaking out publicly. His reasons for breaking that silence now are urgent. The new season content is more intense than anything previously aired, and Aaron feels viewers need to understand the reality behind what they're about to watch. He wants to set the record straight about conflicts and concerns that have existed behind the scenes for years. He's worried about amateur paranormal investigators who watch Ghost Adventures and attempt to replicate what they see without understanding the real dangers involved. What Aaron wants viewers to know: Ghost Adventures is real investigation, not scripted drama or manufactured scares. The danger is genuine and documented. Crew members suffer real, lasting consequences from investigations. The evidence they capture is legitimately unexplained, but entertainment value should not override basic safety responsibilities. Aaron's current relationship with Ghost Adventures is complicated. He remains committed to documenting paranormal phenomena and seeking answers about consciousness, death, and what lies beyond. But he's actively advocating for more responsible investigation approaches, pushing back against network pressure for constant escalation. He's establishing his own boundaries about what he will and won't participate in, even if that creates production conflicts. And he's genuinely uncertain about his long-term future with the show. His message about the paranormal is direct. It is real and genuinely dangerous. Amateur investigators risk serious harm. Some locations should be left alone. Protection and preparation are essential. Consequences can be permanent. The new season will challenge even longtime believers. Some episodes made him question continuing, but he's committed to seeing it through. When it airs, viewers will understand why he's speaking out now. After 15 years, he's telling the truth about what that journey has cost him and why this season may represent his final investigations with Ghost Adventures. For over 2 decades, Zak Bagans has made a living investigating the paranormal. As the creator and star of Ghost Adventures, he's built an empire on confronting spirits, provoking them, and demanding they show themselves. He's faced down alleged demons in the world's most haunted locations. He's been attacked, scratched, and supposedly possessed on camera. Millions of viewers have watched him do what he does best, pushing boundaries and challenging the unknown. But now, Zak is facing something far more terrifying than any ghost he's ever encountered. He's facing a courtroom. A visitor to his haunted museum in Las Vegas is suing him, claiming that Zak commanded a spirit to attack them. That visitor ended up in the hospital with heart failure, and now they want justice. This isn't just about one incident at one museum. This is about accountability. This is about whether you can be held legally responsible for invoking the supernatural. Can words directed at spirits carry real-world consequences? The night everything changed started like any other tour at the haunted museum. A group of paying visitors walked through dimly lit halls filled with cursed objects, haunted mirrors, and artifacts that Zak himself has warned are genuinely dangerous. But this particular night was special. Zak Bagans was there in person, conducting part of the tour himself. According to the lawsuit filed months later, the group entered one of the museum's most active rooms. The atmosphere felt heavy. Several visitors reported feeling watched. And then Zak began doing what he's famous for. He started provoking whatever spirits might be present. But according to witnesses, he went further than usual. The lawsuit claims that Zak directly commanded the spirits to attack the tour group. "Show them what you can do," he allegedly said. "Get them. Make them feel your power." One visitor immediately felt intense chest pain and difficulty breathing. Within minutes, they collapsed on the museum floor. Emergency services rushed them to the hospital where they were diagnosed with acute heart failure. To understand the gravity of this lawsuit, you need to understand who Zak Bagans is in the paranormal world. He's not just another ghost hunter. He's an icon. Since creating Ghost Adventures in 2008, Zak has filmed over 300 episodes investigating some of the world's most haunted locations. But what sets him apart is his method. While other investigators try to communicate peacefully with spirits, Zak confronts them aggressively. He taunts them. He challenges them to attack him. It's made for compelling television and earned him millions of devoted fans. In 2017, he opened the Haunted Museum in a historic Las Vegas mansion. It's not just a tourist attraction. According to Zak, it's genuinely one of the most haunted buildings in America. The museum houses over 30 rooms filled with cursed objects from around the world. The Dybbuk box, Ed Gein's cauldron, Bela Lugosi's mirror. Every visitor must sign a detailed liability waiver before entering. Pregnant women are banned from certain rooms. Zak has always maintained these aren't just props. They're real supernatural threats. The Haunted Museum has always had a controversial reputation. Since opening day, there have been numerous reports of visitors experiencing extreme reactions. People have fainted, others have had panic attacks. Some claim to have been pushed or touched by invisible forces. Zak has documented many of these incidents on his shows and social media, and he's never downplayed the dangers. In fact, he's emphasized them repeatedly. He stated publicly that the objects in his museum are genuinely cursed and potentially harmful. These aren't theatrical props or special effects. According to Zak, they're real supernatural threats. That's why the extensive waivers exist. That's why there are so many warnings posted throughout the building. But here's where things get legally complicated. If you genuinely believe these objects are dangerous and you're bringing paying customers into close contact with them, what's your legal duty of care? The lawsuit argues that Zak can't have it both ways. He can't build his brand by claiming the museum is genuinely dangerous, then hide behind liability waivers when someone actually gets hurt, especially when he allegedly commanded spirits to attack visitors. The lawsuit filed against Zak Bagans and his museum makes several serious legal allegations. First, negligence. The plaintiff argues that Zak failed to provide a reasonably safe environment for paying visitors. Second, reckless endangerment. By actively provoking spirits and commanding them to attack guests, he allegedly created an unreasonable and preventable risk of harm. Third, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit claims Zak's actions were so extreme and outrageous that they exceeded all bounds of decency. And then there's the critical question of the liability waiver. Yes, the plaintiff signed one before entering the museum, as all visitors must. But their legal team argues the waiver doesn't apply. in this specific situation. Why? Because a waiver can't protect you if you intentionally cause harm to someone. If a person signs a waiver to enter a haunted house attraction, that doesn't give the operators permission to physically attack them. Similarly, the lawsuit argues, commanding a spirit to harm someone goes beyond what any reasonable person would expect when signing a waiver for a paranormal museum tour. The case is asking courts to answer unprecedented questions. So what exactly does the person suing Zak Bagans actually want? First and foremost, compensation for medical expenses. Heart failure treatment isn't cheap. The plaintiff spent multiple days hospitalized and continues to require ongoing cardiac care. Their medical bills have been substantial and continue to accumulate, but it goes beyond just covering costs. The lawsuit seeks significant damages for pain and suffering. The plaintiff claims they've experienced ongoing health problems since the incident. They live with the psychological trauma of what happened that night in the museum. They've developed anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder related to the experience. Their quality of life has been permanently diminished. Then there's the request for punitive damages. This is money specifically meant to punish the defendant and deter similar behavior in the future. The plaintiff's legal team argues that Zak's alleged actions were so reckless and showed such disregard for visitor safety that he needs to be held accountable in a way that prevents this from ever happening to anyone else. Finally, they're asking for operational changes to how the museum functions, better medical supervision during tours, more comprehensive health screenings. Zak Bagans' legal defense team has several strategies they're likely employing. The most obvious is the liability waiver. Every single person who enters the haunted museum signs a comprehensive waiver before their tour begins. This document explicitly warns visitors that they may experience paranormal phenomena and potentially harmful physical or psychological effects. It states clearly that the museum contains objects believed to be cursed, haunted, or otherwise dangerous. Visitors acknowledge these risks and agree not to hold the museum, its staff, or its owner responsible for any negative experiences they might have. The defense will argue forcefully that the plaintiff knew exactly what they were getting into and voluntarily assumed all associated risks. But there's a significant problem with relying solely on this defense. Courts generally don't uphold liability waivers that attempt to cover intentional harm or gross negligence. You can't sign away your right to sue if someone deliberately hurts you. So the plaintiff's legal team will argue that commanding spirits to attack someone crosses that critical line. The defense also faces a causation challenge. How do you prove that a spirit actually caused the heart failure? Another defense strategy Zak's lawyers might employ is the entertainment argument. They could claim that his provocation of spirits is performance art, not genuine supernatural invocation. It's part of the theatrical experience, designed to create atmosphere and excitement for paying visitors. Think about traditional haunted house attractions. The actors jump out and scare you. They say frightening things. They create an intense, scary atmosphere. But everyone understands it's theater. Nobody expects actual supernatural harm to occur. The defense could argue that Zak's commands to spirits fall into the exact same category of entertainment. They're theatrical elements meant to enhance the museum experience and give visitors the thrill they paid for. But this defense strategy has a potentially fatal flaw. Zak Bagans has spent his entire career insisting that his work is completely real. He's not an actor playing a character for the cameras. He genuinely believes in what he does and has said so repeatedly. He's written multiple books, given countless interviews, and made endless public statements affirming his sincere belief in the paranormal and the genuine dangers present in his museum. His own credibility and reputation work directly against him here. This lawsuit raises legal questions that courts have rarely, if ever, had to seriously address. Can you be held liable for a ghost's actions? At first glance, that sounds completely absurd. Courts don't generally recognize supernatural causation in civil cases. Ghosts aren't going to be named as defendants in lawsuits, but the plaintiff isn't actually claiming that a ghost directly caused their harm. They're claiming that Zak Bagans caused their harm through his deliberate and reckless actions. Think about it this way. If someone assures you that a bridge is completely safe when they know it's structurally unsound and about to collapse, they're legally liable when you cross it and get injured. It doesn't matter whether the bridge itself or gravity caused your injuries. Their negligent assurance caused you to take a dangerous action that resulted in harm. Similarly, if Zak commands spirits to attack someone, he's creating the dangerous situation. Whether spirits are objectively real or not becomes almost irrelevant to the legal analysis. His actions, his commands, his creation of an environment where someone genuinely believed they were under supernatural attack. That's what allegedly caused the medical emergency. Here's where things get philosophically and legally complicated. What if Zak Bagans genuinely, sincerely believes he can command spirits? Does his belief make his actions more negligent or less? One argument says that if he truly believes spirits are real and genuinely dangerous, he has an even greater duty of care to protect visitors from them. Imagine a zookeeper who genuinely believes tigers are dangerous predators. If that zookeeper opened the tiger enclosure and commanded the animals to attack visiting tourists, their sincere belief in the danger wouldn't excuse their actions. It would make them more legally culpable because they knowingly created a dangerous situation. The same logic could apply here. If Zak genuinely believes spirits can harm people, and he deliberately commands them to do exactly that, he's knowingly and intentionally creating a dangerous situation for paying customers who trusted him to keep them reasonably safe. On the other hand, courts typically don't validate supernatural beliefs as either legal defenses or as legitimate bases for liability. They can't start making official rulings on whether ghosts objectively exist. But here's the thing, they don't actually have to. The fundamental question isn't whether spirits exist. The outcome of this case will likely depend heavily on witness testimony. Multiple people were present during the alleged incident, and their accounts will be absolutely crucial. Some tour members corroborate the plaintiff's version of events. They confirm that Zak was actively and aggressively provoking spirits that night. They remember him using intense commanding language and specifically telling entities to show their power and affect the group. Several witnesses reported feeling genuinely frightened or uncomfortable with how intense the provocation became. They felt it crossed a line from entertainment into something more dangerous. Other people who were present that same night tell a very different story. They claim it was a completely standard museum tour, nothing unusual or out of the ordinary whatsoever. Zak was simply doing what he always does, what people specifically pay money to see him do. Nothing seemed particularly reckless or dangerous about his behavior. The visitor's sudden collapse appeared completely unrelated to anything Zak said or did. Then, there's the critically important question of museum staff testimony. Current and former employees may be called to testify about how common medical emergencies actually are at the haunted museum. The medical evidence in this case will be fiercely and expertly contested by both sides. The plaintiff's medical experts will testify that extreme psychological stress and overwhelming terror can absolutely trigger acute cardiac events, even in otherwise healthy individuals with no prior heart problems. There's a well-documented medical phenomenon called stress cardiomyopathy, sometimes known as broken heart syndrome. Intense emotional trauma can literally cause physical damage to the heart muscle. When someone experiences overwhelming fear, their body floods with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Heart rate and blood pressure spike dramatically. In susceptible individuals, this physiological stress response can trigger dangerous arrhythmias, heart attacks, or acute heart failure. The plaintiff's medical team will argue that the terror induced by genuinely believing a malevolent supernatural entity was attacking them, especially after Zak explicitly commanded it to do so, created exactly this kind of extreme, dangerous stress response. Meanwhile, Zak's medical experts will focus intently on identifying any possible pre-existing conditions. They'll thoroughly examine the plaintiff's complete medical history, looking for any prior cardiac issues, risk factors, or family history of heart disease. The paranormal community has been completely split by this lawsuit. Zak's most loyal fans have rushed to his defense on social media and online forums. They point out that everyone who enters the haunted museum signs a detailed liability waiver explicitly acknowledging the risks. They argue that the plaintiff knew exactly what they were signing up for when they bought their ticket. You don't visit a place literally called the haunted museum, expecting complete safety and zero risk. If you're afraid of paranormal encounters or have health concerns, simply don't go to a paranormal attraction. It's that simple. But not everyone in the ghost hunting world supports Zak in this situation. Some very experienced and respected paranormal investigators have been criticizing his aggressive methods for years. They argue that provoking spirits is disrespectful to the entities themselves and potentially dangerous, especially when you're doing it with untrained civilians present. Professional investigators might personally choose to take those risks themselves during private investigations, but they would never bring paying customers into situations where they're actively commanding entities to attack people. Several prominent figures in paranormal research have publicly stated they would never conduct aggressive provocation with tour groups present. This lawsuit has sent genuine shockwaves through the entire paranormal tourism industry. Operators of haunted attractions, ghost tours, paranormal museums, and supernatural experiences across the country are watching this case extremely carefully. The outcome could fundamentally change how these businesses operate on a day-to-day basis. Insurance companies are already getting nervous. Many paranormal attractions already struggle to obtain adequate liability coverage because of the unpredictable nature of how visitors might react to scary or intense experiences. If this lawsuit succeeds and results in a substantial judgment against Zak, liability insurance for paranormal attractions could become prohibitively expensive or completely impossible to obtain at any price. Some smaller attractions might be forced to close their doors permanently. Others are already making significant changes preemptively before any court ruling. They're implementing much more detailed and comprehensive liability waivers. They're adding stricter health screening procedures before allowing people on tours. Some are requiring medical personnel to be on site during all public events. Many are developing clear written guidelines about exactly what investigators and tour guides can and cannot say or do around paying customers. What's particularly notable about this entire controversy is Zak Bagans' relative public silence. For someone who built his entire career on being outspoken, confrontational, and never backing down from a challenge, he's been remarkably quiet about this lawsuit. His social media accounts, which are usually extremely active with daily posts and interactions with fans, have barely mentioned the legal case at all. He hasn't made any significant public statements defending himself, explaining his side of the story, or addressing the allegations directly. This silence is almost certainly happening on the explicit advice of his legal team. Anything Zak says publicly about the case could potentially be used as evidence against him in court. Every tweet, every Instagram post, every interview response, every offhand comment could be scrutinized, quoted, and presented to a jury. His lawyers have undoubtedly told him in no uncertain terms to say absolutely nothing until the case is completely resolved. But his silence is deafening to his millions of fans who desperately want to hear from him. They want reassurance that he didn't actually put someone in danger. They want to understand what really happened that night in the museum. The complete absence of his voice in this conversation creates a vacuum that's being filled by speculation, rumors, and competing narratives from all sides. Legal experts who have been following this case believe the most likely outcome is a private settlement agreement. The vast majority of civil lawsuits never actually make it to trial. Both sides usually find it more advantageous to negotiate a confidential agreement outside of court. For Zak and his legal team, a settlement means avoiding the significant uncertainty and risk of a jury trial. Juries are unpredictable, and you never know what they might decide or how much they might award in damages. A settlement means controlling the narrative and keeping all specific details private through a comprehensive, non-disclosure agreement. It means the case goes away relatively quietly, without months or years of damaging publicity. For the plaintiff, accepting a settlement means guaranteed compensation without the very real risk of losing at trial and receiving nothing. It means avoiding the enormous stress, time commitment, and expense of lengthy court proceedings that could drag on for years. It means getting medical bills paid and receiving damages for their suffering without gambling on what a jury might decide. A settlement would likely involve Zak paying a substantial but undisclosed sum of money in exchange for the lawsuit being completely dropped. Neither party would admit any fault or wrongdoing. If this case actually goes to trial and the plaintiff wins, the consequences would be absolutely enormous for everyone involved. First, there's the direct financial impact on Zak personally. The jury could award substantial compensatory damages for medical expenses, ongoing treatment costs, pain and suffering, and emotional distress. But more significantly, they could award massive punitive damages specifically designed to punish Zak and deter similar behavior in the future. Punitive damages in cases like this can easily reach into the millions of dollars. A plaintiff victory would also set binding legal precedent that other courts would follow. It would establish that operators of paranormal attractions can be held directly liable for their actions during tours, even when comprehensive liability waivers have been signed. It would create new standards and legal tests for what constitutes reckless endangerment in the context of paranormal tourism. Other lawsuits against other paranormal attractions would almost certainly follow quickly. The haunted museum itself might be forced to make major operational changes to continue operating, or it might have to close permanently. Zak would face court-ordered restrictions on what he can say and do during any public events. His reputation, carefully built over 2 decades, would be severely and perhaps permanently damaged. On the other hand, if Zak's defense team prevails and wins the case, that creates its own significant set of implications for the industry. A defense victory would validate the liability waiver approach that most paranormal attractions currently use. It would legally establish that if you explicitly warn people about potential paranormal dangers and make them sign comprehensive liability releases acknowledging those risks, you're largely protected from subsequent lawsuits. It would mean that courts are fundamentally unwilling to hold people legally accountable for supernatural claims, viewing them as either pure entertainment or unprovable personal beliefs, rather than actionable negligence that can form the basis of liability. For Zak personally, winning would mean complete vindication. He could publicly claim he did absolutely nothing wrong, and that the legal system agreed with him. He could return to his signature aggressive investigation style without any fear of legal consequences. The haunted museum would continue operating exactly as it has been with no required changes whatsoever. But a defense victory might also embolden even more extreme behavior throughout the paranormal tourism industry. If liability waivers legally protect operators no matter what happens during tours, what's to stop increasingly aggressive and potentially dangerous practices?